Welcome to the eLearn Security video training file for Metasploit installation and general use. We'll be installing Metasploit on a Ubuntu 9.10 machine. So let's open up our browser and go to www.metasploit.com. On the Metasploit page, we will find the quick links section. We want to click Download Metasploit. That takes us to the download page. We're going to select the framework 3.3.3 for Linux x86_64 because we're running a 64-bit Ubuntu machine. Once we click that link, it will begin to download the file. Once the file is downloaded, we want to go to the folder where it's installed. Once we've opened up our folder, we want to go to the file and right-click on the file and go to Properties. From the Properties page, we want to select the Permissions tab. And on the Permissions tab, we're going to check the box to allow executing file as a program. This will allow us to launch it from a command line. Now that we're done with this, let's go to a terminal window, and we want to switch to the directory where we've downloaded the file. It's highly recommended for running Metasploit that you expand your terminal screen out, at least all the way to the bottom, if not to the full screen. So now we'll go over to the directory where we downloaded our file, and if we do a listing, we see our file there. So as always, we want to start the installation as a super user, so we'll enter in the sudo command. Now a lot of people ask how you can accurately type the commands in Linux because the file names tend to be so long. Well, a quick cheat to that with the GUI portion of Linux is to highlight, copy, and then paste the command into the command line. And that'll keep you from having to type so much. Once you do that, hit run. As you can see, we've got an error here that installation already exists on this Linux box because we have already used it, but we want to replace it, so we're going to go ahead and enter yes to continue with the installation. And what this will do is install it, and you see the next line that comes up is that we're going to place Metasploit in the opt Metasploit 3 directory. So we want to answer yes to that. So you see it's going to remove the files from the previous installation, and then it's going to begin extracting the operating environment and then the framework. Next you see that it completes the installation, and now it's going to ask us some configuration questions. The first one being if we want to auto-update. Next it's going to ask if we'd like to update Metasploit now. We'll go ahead and do that to make for sure we've got the latest and greatest copy. Once that's finished, we'll see up on the screen that it says in order to launch Metasploit, we can run the MSF console command. There are actually multiple ways to run Metasploit, but we're going to use the MSF console command because it's the most widely supported. So what we can do is clear our text box by typing in clear, and then we'll go up and we'll start the MSF console. Now that we see the Metasploit console prompt, the MSF, and the greater than sign, we can actually check and do a show of all of the exploits available by typing in the show exploits command, and you'll see all of those show up within the window. The next thing we can do is actually do a search within those exploits. We'll do a search for DCE-RPC, which is a Windows vulnerability. And then once we find the one we want, we just use the exploit command. So by using use exploit /Windows/DCE-RPC, and we're going to use the MS03026 exploit. We have a Windows XP machine running on our network that is vulnerable to this exploit, so we can show you how this works. So you see once we type this use exploit command in, that our prompt changes. It shows that we're at the MSF prompt. We're in the exploit. We've chosen an exploit, and within the parentheses is the exploit that we are currently working with. And from here, what we can do is take a look at the available payloads for this exploit. So by doing a show payloads command, those come up. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a payload that uses the meterpreter to do a bind TCP, which basically will give us a remote command shell to our exploited machine once it completes. So we'll do set payload Windows Meterpreter bind underscore TCP. And once we set that, we notice our prompt doesn't change, but now we have those two parts of the exploit defined, the exploit itself and the payload that we want it to deliver. We can take a look at the options that are available or that we have to complete for these two individual settings. You'll see the module options at the top. It gives you two settings of our host and our port. Note that that's the target address and the target port. Whether or not those are required, both of them are, and what the current settings are. Anything that does not have a current setting is ones that you want to set. So by looking at this, we see the top option, which is the exploit, is the rhost needs to be set. At the bottom, the payload options. The exit function's already set. It is required. The L port's already set. It is required. But the rhost is not. So we want, and it is not required, but it's generally a good idea to go ahead and set it. And we'll set that rhost with the exploit anyway, so it'll populate it for the payload. So let's take a look at how we could complete those commands. First, we do a set rhost, and we type in the IP address of our victim address. For this system, it's 10.0.2.10. Then we'll want to set the L port. As we stated before, the L port is already set, but I like to use a specific port so I can also set up netcat and watch traffic coming in on that port. So we'll make it 5678, just something easy to remember. Now that we've got those typed in, we can actually commence with our exploit. So at the command prompt at this point, we type in exploit, and it begins the exploitation process. Notice that it starts the bind handler. It starts communicating with the target. You see it's binding to the specific DCOM section. Once it's bound, it starts sending the exploit. Don't get discouraged because you see that the DCE RPC service did not reply to our request, because what we see right after that is that it's sending the stage, and then right below it we see the Meterpreter session 1 opened. That's an indication that our exploit has succeeded. Once we see this section here that's being highlighted, and we notice that the prompt has changed to Meterpreter. So we have now successfully exploited the system. So at this point, we'll take a look and see what we can do with Meterpreter. And in order to see the available commands through Meterpreter, just type a question mark and hit enter. So the first thing we can try to do is see what system we've actually gotten a hold of. And by that, we type in the sysinfo. Notice that we've got the computer name, the OS, what the architecture is, and the language currently in use on that box. Next, we can actually take a look at the C drive by doing a change directory command to the C:/, hitting enter, and then in order to list the directory, we do it as a Linux command, which is ls, and that lists out the directory for us. Note that here we can also see the available attributes on each of the destination folders or files. You see read, write, execute on some, read on some only, read, write on others. So from here, we can try to elevate our privilege by using the use priv. We see that that's already done by default with the latest version of Metasploit. Then the next thing we want to try is a command called hashdump. And what this does, from what you can see here, is it actually lists out the known user IDs along with their LM hash. So that basically gives us the ability to take this information, put it through a password cracker, and crack the passwords for each of the users on this system. As you'll see here, what we'll do is we'll go up and we'll start a general text editor. Then we'll come back and we'll select these files, copy them, and paste them into the text editor for later use to be able to come back and run the password cracker on them. So now that we've got that, we can clear and take a look at the commands once again that are available. And what we can do is type in next is idle time. That'll tell us how long that the exploited box that we've been on has been idle for. If we're watching out for screensaver timeouts or any other security settings that may interrupt our session, we can keep track of that here. Next thing we're going to take a look at is get system. The get system command is a privilege escalation command which gives you system access. Once we run this command, we could actually add additional users to this machine, plan our own user ID. Just keep in mind that anything you do add with the system ability is going to be logged and recorded. So we see here that we've gotten the system. And once we're finished running our commands, all we have to do is type exit at the end of the command prompt, and that will exit us out of the interpreter. And then you can type exit again at the MSF prompt, and that will exit us out of the Metasploit Framework console. This concludes our training for today. Thank you for joining us.